Hey guys, today we'll be doing my top 10 uh, senators in U.S. history, my top 10 best senators in U.S. history for today. And on the first on the list we have is Bob Dole. Now, Bob Dole was senator from 1964 to around 1996. His accomplishments include disability rights, key sponsor of the Americans with Disability Act in 1990. He was a bipartisan leader, worked across an aisle on food security and social security and veterans issues, and he was a World War II veteran and strong advocate. Now, here's a little interesting fun fact about Bob Dole. Bob Dole was known was known for his humor and his dry wit. Famously around 1996, after losing the presidential election against Bill Clinton, he said, um, oh sorry, he said, he slept like a quotes when he asked about his election and how he felt about it. He said he never thought about it and slept like a baby when he went to bed. And that actually is what he said. I have it right here. So here's what he said. Basically, he said this quote: famous for his dry example. When he was asked how he felt after losing the 1996 presidential election, he joked and said, quote, "I slept like a baby. I woke up 2 hours later and cried." So that's Bob Dole's humor. It was dry, it was witty, it was dry, it was wit. It bitten Biden. It wasn't that, it wasn't that. He also became a pitchman for Pepsi and Viagra. Number 9, Burton K. Wheeler. Burton K. Wheeler was senator of Montana from 1922 to 1946. Now, he was infamous for two reasons. He was famous. He was famous for two reasons. Number one, he was an isolationist to the core, but he also was a very progressive and principled man himself. He was a Democrat. He was a progressive Democrat. He opposed corruption, was a part of the Teapot Dome investigation. He opposed FDR's attempts to involve the U.S. in World War II before Pearl Harbor, and supported labor rights and the New Deal programs early on. Here's the fun fact behind him about him. About Burton K. Wheeler. He switched parties multiple times. He started as a Democrat, ran with Robert M. Lafayette, and sent to the void of Republicans. Once investigated Teapot Dome scandal, which nearly brought down President Harding's administration. He called FDR's plan to World War II a plot for dictatorship, which, by the way, I do think is kind of stupid. But Burton K. Wheeler was very principled. I'll say real quick, and he never cracked down on his belief. John Glenn. Number 8, John Glenn, senator from Ohio, advocated for science and space as the first American to orbit Earth. He championed funding for NASA and STEM education, government ethics, and sponsored the Government Ethics and Reform Act, increasing transparency and accountability in the Congress. Now, here's a fun fact about John Glenn. John Glenn, before he retired in office, he went back to space at the age of 77, and he became the oldest person to orbit the Earth again. And John Glenn was senator of the great state of Ohio from 1974 to 1996. So he was senator for about a couple years, I would say, and he was a very, really, really good senator. Sorry. Number 7, John Sherman, longest senator of Ohio. Also, he was Secretary of State and Secretary of Treasury. And we'll talk about him. John Sherman, Senator of Ohio. His most famous contribution. This was the famous Sherman Antitrust Act. This was the first federal law that outlawed monopoly business practices. He also worked to stabilize the U.S. currency after the Civil War. Now, fun fact about John Sherman: when John Sherman first proposed the famous he also was famous brothers. He also was the brother of William Tecumseh Sherman, the famous general. I believe his dad. I forget. I think his dad was some powerful military. I think his dad was political office and under Zachary Taylor. So Sherman had his family had political ties going up. It was not like his family was had nothing going on and were weak and disturbed. They had connections. But here's a fun fact real quick. When he first proposed the Sherman antitrust law, he just thought that it was going to go after when he first proposed it, he had no idea how radically it was going, how radically its impact would be on big business. So for him, when he first proposed in 1890, he proposed to go after big railroads, big companies. And around 1996, they started going after meat companies, stuff like that. And he was surprised that he was just wait, what? I made this just to go after railroads, not everybody else. Number 6, Robert F. Wagner. So Wagner is a good example because Wagner was senator. His name. So he's famous because his most famous accomplishment is the Wagner Act, which is one of the cornerstones of the New Deal, protected workers' rights to unionize and bargain. He also passed something called the Wagner Housing Act, which championed house reform and social welfare. And he's famous because, despite his influence, he's relatively unknown to the general public, and is often called the forgotten architect. Was a German immigrant who rose from poverty in New York City to become a senator, which is very impressive. At number 5, we have Hiram Johnson. At number 5, Hiram Johnson, progressive reformer, leader of the progressive movement. He fought against corruption and was a key supporter of institutions, referendums, and recalls in California politics. He opposed U.S. involvement in the League of Nations and reflected the isolation of Superman. He also was part of people called the. I think this was at the World War I during the League of Nations debate. The Inconsistibles. They were made up by senators who refused to join the war and said no, you're gonna have to fucking kill us for us to join the fucking war. He ran. So you might know that he ran for vice president with Teddy Roosevelt on the progressive ticket. He often bucked with both parties. Was known for his sharp tongue and debatable debate, and was one of the first major politicians to embrace direct democracy tools like referendums and initiatives. That's number 5. And I have great respect for every senator. This is my opinion. For every senator on this list is somebody I deeply respect. Daniel Webster. So Daniel Webster, renowned orator, who defended the Union, his second speech to Hayne, famous speech supporting the supremacy of federal law and national unity, helped negotiate the Compromise of 1850. So the funny thing about Daniel Webster, I would say, is number 1, great speaker, one of the great orators of the U.S. history. He once defended the devil in a fictional short story called The Devil and Daniel Webster, in which he argues against the devil himself, saying himself in court. Despite his eloquence and fame, he was never elected president or even nominated. Yeah, that's true. He was never. I think he did run for president. If I'm correct. He was never nominated as president ever. He never wanted to be president. He was senator from Massachusetts. He never dreamed to become president at all. He never had any ambitions to become president. In fact, when he was asked about it, he just said to himself, "No, I don't want to do it." Number 3, George North. Now, George North is probably my favorite example of somebody who came from dirt poor poverty and a guy who could have been very, 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 very conservative, but decided to use his power to help people. Help people. Considered one of the most principled senators in U.S. history, even when it cost him. So his biggest accomplishments include the TVA. He co-authored the law creating the Tennessee Valley Authority, bringing electricity and development to rural South. Fought for nonpartisan politics and helped reform the House of Representatives to reduce the Speaker's power. This was back in 1911, when the Speaker of the House had all the control. Strong advocate for public power and anti-war positions. And also, he was very famous because he played a huge role in creating the famous URSMO one chamber legislative in Nebraska, the only one in the U.S. He hated partisan politics. In fact, he was called a jackass. He was called a son of a jackass by other conservative Republicans, including Nicholas Murray Butler, Frank Loden, a few others who despised him. Herbert Hoover disliked him with intensity, and he was disliked by a lot of conservative Republicans because he would vote against them. In fact, he supported Al Smith, FDR. He disliked hard intensity with intensity. Robert L. Lafayette, senator from Wisconsin, progressive icon, major advocate for workers' rights, anti-corruption, and regulation of big business. He opposed U.S. entry into World War I and fought for civil liberties during war times. Founded the Progressive Party in 1924. So we'll talk about Robert Lafayette. Nicknamed Fighting Bob for his fiery speeches and his confrontational styles. Once his mouth literally was stuffed with soap by older boys for talking too much, possibly foreshadowing his future as a great orator. Yeah, and also when he ran for Progressive Party, he won his state of Wisconsin, but he also won nearly 16% of the vote, which, by the way, is one of the highest showing third-party candidates polls ever. The highest third-party candidate is Teddy Roosevelt in 1912 for the Bull Moose Party. Ross Perot, Robert Lafayette, and I believe John Anderson is on one of the lists. Not sure. John B. Anderson. Henry Clay, known as the great compromiser for his ability to craft agreements between the North and South. Missouri Compromise of 1820, which the Missouri Compromise is agreement which basically said that the states below Missouri will be slave states and the states above Missouri will be Union states. He promoted the American system, a plan for economic development with internal improvements in the National Bank. He supported the National Bank, tariffs, and he also supported creating mass infrastructure bills. So here's a fact about Henry Clay. I would have to say, number one, he ran for president 3 times, which is, by the way, is the most anybody's run for president and lost. If I had to name the 3 people who actually ran for president the most and actually lost, it would be Henry Clay, William Jennings Bryan. That's it. Oh, and maybe I could spring up and say maybe Thomas Dewey. But Henry Clay and William Jennings Bryan, because they both ran for president multiple times. Henry Clay ran for president for 3 times. William Jennings Bryan ran for president 3 times. They both lost. They both famous for they both lost, and they're also famous because of their talking and because of orator speaking ability. Famous for his dueling days, Clay once fought with Senator John Randolph. They missed each other and then shook hands. Clay called the Great Compromiser, but ironically, many of his compromises only delayed the Civil War, which is true, yeah. So, also with Henry Clay, though, Henry Clay was criticized because Henry Clay is looked up to as a hero. And I actually visited Henry Clay's house. It's in Loxton, Kentucky, and I actually visited it. And beautiful house. It's an absolute amazing house. And I had no idea. I knew who Henry Clay was. I knew he was Speaker of the House, and he was a presidential nominee. I knew he was a senator from Kentucky, but I had no idea who he was as a person. And I went to the house, and when I walked out, my opinion of Henry Clay changed overnight. Changed the second after that 40-minute tour. I walked out of that building and think to myself, holy shit. We need more men in politics like Henry Clay. I mean, this man was not perfect. This man was not, some great. You can talk about, like, yeah, he didn't free slaves in the last day. He didn't do that. He didn't do that. But this man stood by his principles, even when it came to some issues that he himself knew was bad, and he opposed slavery. But he believed in something called gradual emancipation. He was a hero to people like Lincoln. Lincoln actually famously gave a eulogy at Henry Clay's funeral, calling him one of the greatest men to ever exist, greatest statesman to ever exist. So, Henry Clay's legacy has always lived on as a man who truly embodied the American system. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. Sorry for my stuttering. I have a stutter. And I've been practicing on it. And I will do more videos like this. So I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure you like and subscribe, and have a wonderful day.